EA is now on Twitch. Join us Wednesday nights when Alistair reads a bedtime story, and Sunday mornings for a few hours of chill casual gaming, plus interviews, special guests, pickup streams, and more. Visit twitch.tv/EA Podcasts and follow us to be notified when we go live, plus access VODs of past broadcasts.
Escape Pod, Episode 840, The Tyrant Lizard and Her +1, and Alien Invader or Assistive Device? By John Wiswell.
Hello, and welcome to Escape Pod, your weekly science fiction podcast. I'm your host this week, Tina Connolly, and I am here to bring you 2 stories this week, both from John Wiswell. The Tyrant Lizard and Her +1 first appeared in Drabblecast, and Alien Invader or Assistive Device first appeared in Robot Dinosaurs. John Wiswell is a disabled writer who lives where New York keeps all its trees. He is a Nebula-winning author of many short stories. His work has appeared in Uncanny Magazine, the LeVar Burton Reads podcast, Tor.com, and the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. Additionally, he has previously had work on Pseudopod, Podcastle, and Cast of Wonders. This episode of Escape Pod marks him making the Grand Slam of Escape Artist shows. Congrats, John! And he's giddy about it. He is currently working on a novel about other disabled monsters. He has loved dinosaurs for longer than he's loved humans, and dreams of one day being eaten by a T-Rex. He can be found on Twitter at Wiswell, and on Patreon at patreon.com/Wiswell. Your narrator this week is Karen Bovenmeier. Karen Bovenmeier earned an MFA in popular fiction from the University of Southern Maine's Stone Coast program in 2013. She was the nonfiction assistant editor for Mothership Zeta, Escape Artist e-zine. Karen teaches and mentors students at Iowa State University and Western Technical College. She is the 2016 recipient of the Horror Writers Association Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley Scholarship. Her poems, short stories, and novellas appear in more than 40 publications, and her first novel, Swift for the Sun, debuted from Dream Spinner Press in 2017. Your audio producer this week is Adam Peratt. These stories have a content notification for a mild expletive or two, as well as a little dinosaur-on-dinosaur carnage. So get ready to help floss the dinosaur's teeth, because it's story time.
The Tyrant Lizard and Her +1 by John Wiswell. Dinosaurs don't want to kill you. They just don't care that you're there. More people have been sat on by brontosauruses than have been eaten by all the theropods combined. Since I joined security on the archipelago, 82% of dinosaur-related human casualties were from tourists who got too close during mating season. And the 4 times I've seen a Deinonychus attack someone, they've always left them uneaten. Why? For the same reason bears and sharks tend to leave victims alive. Because humans taste like shit. The easiest way to survive is to not come here at all. You may remember my crew from the news 3 years ago when the government sent us to claim these islands in the name of democracy or whatever. I only took this job because I was drowning in bills and going deaf. Opportunities were short. It was an exciting 6 months before Congress cut our funding and left us with 0 evac and 0 back pay. Now I literally can't afford to leave. If you see my senator, Please tell him Miss Plover sends her finest expletives. Nowadays, my job is managing the food for my fellow orphans. The government is gone, but food suppliers keep dumping here. We get airdrops of grain and meat-like substances that were too low grade for corporations to sell in the Americas. Thanks to regulations, they pocket write-offs by dropping their garbage on the lawns of dinosaurs. I'm on my way outside to paint when the tripwires go off, letting me know I have heavier company than usual waiting outside. I left my brushes and pigments outside and instantly fear for them. Painting is the one respite I have out here, even if my Tumblr has 3 followers. In high school, Mr. Dennett said I lacked the ability and discipline, but I do it for myself, not for the memory of teachers who nag their students. Dinosaurs are less opinionated about amateur fauvism. The tripwire trembles 2 more times, waving colored flags, and then I'm sure it's the ducks outside. See, the ducks don't care that I'm here, but they love discount bulk grains. I feel the vibrations of their feet thudding on the concrete outside as I grab my trusty vuvuzela. The ducks are probably going after the cargo containers again. When I say ducks, I mean hadrosaurs. They are some of the most social critters on the island, and if you drop crumbs on the ground once, they'll follow after you, honking forever for more that you don't have. It's no surprise they evolved into ducks. So I head outside with the vuvuzela that I stole from a drunken David Beckham impersonator at the only sports game I ever went to. I come out blowing. The sudden loud noise usually spooks the ducks into fleeing the premises. I have a backup alarm, but this usually does the trick. There are no ducks. First, I look to the jungle, expecting them to flee south to the river. Then I check the parking lot, which is similarly vacant. This is weird. Hadrosaurs always dumpster dive in flocks. A single tail juts from inside the garage. The other ex-employees forgot to close the shutters after picking up their shipment, and a dino got in. Something with a way bigger tail than my ducks. Standing halfway in the door, I give another blast of the vuvuzela. The tail ignores me, swaying as its owner munches hips deep on a frozen fast food smorgasbord. I grab a chunk of asphalt and hurl it at the tail. That gets her attention. She turns quicker than a hadrosaur, just like evolution ordered. She reels on my door with 50 teeth and breath that gingivitis has nightmares about. She's a Zoochen tyrannus, the archipelago's dominant brand of tyrannosaur, and she's definitely looking at me. Her gaze makes me drop the vuvuzela. It plunks to the ground as I reach for my phone and swipe for the only app that still works. I'm over 90% deaf in my good ear, and the rumble of her footsteps is fully audible to me. The earth shakes, the vibrations traveling up my entire body. I can hear her with my feet. She is as close as she needs to be to turn me into a cautionary tale. I hit the emergency app, signaling every light and siren in the compound. It's an overcast, early morning, and suddenly the parking lot is painfully bright from floodlighting, and the klaxons drown out anything for 2 square miles. That spooks the Zoocheng tyrannus, who bangs her head against a cargo container, denting it deeply, and then she sprints directly at me. This is my fault, hitting an alarm that makes the critter run in whatever direction she's facing. The mix of light and noise might as well be a hurricane, and anything alive runs from it. My dumbass made an off-brand T-Rex charge directly at me. I dive indoors, the heavy steel slamming behind me, and pray to a god that I otherwise don't admit believing in. I hyperventilate, hugging my sides. Trampling is a huge human killer. How lucky was I to have made it out of that alive? When my fingers stop shaking, I swipe the alarm off and poke my head outside. My Cretaceous visitor is gone, leaving behind a trail of crushed cars. She must have hauled tail out of here. After all that, I need a smoke and a canvas, and there haven't been cigarettes on the island in years. It'll take hours of painting to really calm my nerves. I look around for my paints for several moments. Did I leave them by the cars? I'm worried the bag has been crushed until I see a single smear of pink across the asphalt. The smear leads into the jungle. The queen of the lizards stole my paints. I keep walking in circles, looking under wreckage I've already checked. Denial is easier than imagining a terrified monster accidentally snagging a bag of painting supplies on her notoriously tiny arms. You think it's hard finding cigarettes out here? Try buying a paintbrush set. Try mixing your own pigments from scratch. I've been stretching out these supplies for years, and now... So shut up about me going in the jungle. I go because I'd rather get trampled out there than live in safety without art. And if you don't understand that, then you're what I don't miss about not living in human society anymore. It takes me half an hour to track to her den. It seems bizarre that I've never seen her before if she lives that close. Then I notice all the newly crushed ferns. There are no bones from carrion or feces anywhere around, although it smells like feces and then some. The Zhucheng Trionus lies on her belly, flattened out across the earth, facing northwest. She's over 35 feet long, with a coat of red and black quills along her spine. She's not a proper T-Rex, but I dare you to call her a knockoff to her face. My fiber weave paint bag is stuck to one of her toes. Her body shudders painfully, and I'm grateful to be coming from the south end, until she rips one. My eyes water so badly that they almost squirt out of my head. It's like if hell had an Axe body spray. This is not a healthy lady. Her guts are full of chemically treated meat-like product that humans haven't evolved to digest, let alone critters from 65 million years ago. The queen of the lizards is sprawled out in pain because she's got indigestion. Taco Bell makes us all feel mortal an hour later. I finish dry heaving, thankful that she doesn't rouse at the sound. I creep up to her left foot. Both straps of the paint bag are wrapped around one of her claws. It doesn't look pulverized, the bag resting atop the foot instead of beneath the heel. This will be easier when she passes out. I check around her right side, trying to make out her eyes, and a dry fern cracks so loud that even I hear it. Not so much the twitch of an eyelid. The irritable monster keeps staring forward like she doesn't hear a thing. She just wants today to be over. I look at the fern under my shoe and remember blowing the vuvuzela at her. Did she run from the sirens? Or just from the light show? No way, I say, despite myself, and she doesn't seem to notice. Her ear canal doesn't twitch in response to a sound right next to her. This Zhucheng Tyrannus is deaf. Deaf, like me. I actually raise both palms and slowly lower them in ASL for calm. My first urge is to teach her to sign with her tiny hands. Or her one remaining tiny hand. I can't go erasing disabilities, not even those of dinosaurs. She's missing her right arm, her scales puffy out around the scar tissue. She has deep grooves down her flank where other critters have hit her over the years. This old lady has led a life. A deaf hunter. A disabled queen whose handicap spot you'd better not steal. That's when I decide to help her out. Zoo is technically my neighbor, and I have an idea. Crocodiles let plover birds into their mouths to peck scraps from their gums. These birds are so small that they're worth not eating in exchange for the pleasure of having someone else do your flossing. That's why my Tumblr handle is Miss Plover. It's a quick trip back to the compound for supplies. I mix a garbage bag of Dino Pepto, stomach-settling drugs from back when the park worked, reptile-friendly antibiotics, and some of that chemical the fast food joints use to make a microwave patty smell fresh off the grill. Theropods hunt on smell anyway. Within 3 seconds of sticking the bag under her snout, Zoo bites into it and throws it back like a Jell-O shot. She does it so fast that I'm stuck there in her line of sight. If she wants to eat this plover bird, she can. I sign calm again, more to myself than her. Zoo returns her head to the ground like she's dismissing the maid. Is it weird to be offended that a dinosaur didn't make eye contact? I linger behind some trees until her shuddering subsides, hoping I haven't killed her. I was barely trained for security. I'm definitely not a vet. 2 tugs later, my paint bag slips free from her foot. The inside of the bag is very blue. 2 tubes of that have burst. That it's pure blue is a relief, because that means none of the other colors broke. I've painted enough skies for a while anyway. I spend the entire hike back to the compound thinking of what to paint. That makeshift dino den would be nice. There were some gorgeous views in the jungle, and even if Zoo sticks around, no smaller predators will mess with me if I go back out there. Plus, I can spend months just sketching the way she crushed those cars. 500 feet out, and the garage stinks like herbivore. I come running, and right around the bend, those damn ducks are banging on the cargo containers. They smelled the grain. They've swarmed around, or at least 3 separate flocks converging on one of the cargo containers Zoo had breached. I've never seen so many ducks in one place. The pavement is slippery with their guano. If I don't get rid of them right now, we're going to lose the entire food supply. As much as I hate my neighbors, I am not letting them starve. Fuck, the herbivores are going to kill us all. Vuvuzela is not going to fix this. I could hit the alarm, but with this many ducks around, their own stampede will kill a lot of them, and their carcasses will turn my compound into a destination dining for carnivores. I pull out my phone, hesitating over what the hell to do as 2 hadrosaurs manage to pop the door off the next container. It swings open, and immediately a dozen more of them drive their heads into the food bins. I turn around to pace, and the biggest blur in the world charges past me. I hear her roaring, hear it from my hair to my toes, and Zoo rips into a hadrosaur's belly. Just as nimbly, she uppercuts a second one with her snout, sending it into a wall before going for the kill. The ducks spook, hopping over the cargo containers, going in all directions but hers. Zoo chases a third one down, catching it by the tail and drawing it into her mouth like spaghetti. I've never in my life imagined a dinosaur being treated like spaghetti. I'm in absolute awe of this creature. The absolute awe lasts about a minute before she starts barfing all over the parking lot. She was healthy enough to hunt, but not to eat. If you feed a duck once, it'll follow after you, honking forever for more that you don't have. Zoo didn't honk. but she had followed me back to the feeding grounds. Her hips shudder and she glances at me. I sign, calm. It'd be anthropomorphizing to say she gives me a look. With that mouth, she always has a look. But when I sign again, she lays down on the asphalt, then barfs up half-digested hadrosaur. She's such a pitiful sight that I want to hold her hair while she barfs. Not that she has hair. Her quills are like anorexic feathers, quivering with her discomfort. I let her rest outside, my personal attack dog. As she alternates between zoning out and nibbling on her leftovers, I sit on the crushed hood of a car and paint. She left me enough red and brown pigments to do her royal likeness justice. It reminds me of Burgess Meredith sitting on the steps of the last library on Earth. Time enough, at last, I say. I spend the afternoon making Twilight Zone jokes at a deaf carnivore. My surprise is that the paintings of a barfing dinosaur get shared a ton online. Weirdos from around the world message me about prints. T-shirt sites steal my art while I'm busy making new pieces. The internet loves paintings of the big lady doing mundane things, like flossing on my clothesline or falling asleep between the solar panels in a way that looks like she's tanning. 2 months later, I have a Patreon. I start it to be able to afford new paints, especially blue, since most of the time I'm painting her from a low perspective and the sky sneaks in there. Demand for art is draining my supplies until the first wave of pledges hits. If you're reading this, you're probably surprised that I'm surprised. I guess this is when I'm supposed to thank my Patreon subscribers. Thank you for supporting the Miss Plover Project. I hope you like the next piece. Some locals heard I'd tamed the beast, and I think this painting captures the terror of them learning that they were very wrong indeed. She is not housebroken, and neither am I. We're a couple of misanthropes. She spends her days prowling for wildlife that doesn't make her as sick as fast food, while I paint our way out from under a crap economy. In a few months, I could afford transportation off this glorified tar pit. I might visit my senator. Although I'm not leaving without my emotional support animal. Does anyone know an airline with a generous policy? Alien Invader or Assistive Device by John Wishwell. Probe was more of an anthropologist than a celestial object. It hit the planet's atmosphere, coming out of sleep mode as friction tried and failed to burn it up. Probe had come too far to go that easily. After breaching the atmosphere, planetfall was easy. Mostly, you just fell. It landed on the north side of a marsh, with as quiet a splash as it could make. Mud still got everywhere in its smart metal fibers. Probe shifted its metal body into sundry shapes, strenuously trying to shake off the filth. Getting messy was the worst part of arrivals. Hopefully, nobody had seen that. Utah's snout followed the funny rain's descent until it landed in the mire. The Utah raptor blinked and sniffed in its direction until whatever it was glinted metallic. Metal tasted terrible and always broke their teeth. Utah had to get back to hunting. Swishing their long, feathered tail, Utah wavered for balance on their injured left leg. The chunk Alpha had bitten from it was not healing right. If they didn't eat soon, it'd fall off like their right arm had. Further up the hill, a brown hippodraco munched on low cedar branches, ignorant of the Utah raptor pack surrounding it from cover. It had clearly eaten well. The pack could feast on a thing that size for days. Utah lowered their snout close to the earth and pushed a chunk of stone up. They had used stones to trick so many of their prey over the years. They turned, readying their tail for the swing, when their leg wound opened further and their entire body seized. They squawked despite themselves and gave their position away. It was the first call for empathy Probe had ever heard. Probe wanted to oblige. It disassembled its nanites into a pool of metal to come up with the friendliest shape. This was Probe's first contact, and it would not mess it up. Before Probe could reshape, the giant herbivore bucked from its dinner of bushes and made for the foothills. 3 more carnivores, like the disabled one, sprang up to chase, but too late. This was Probe's chance to blend in with a whole family of locals. It tried to speed up its transformation. Utah collapsed onto a thorny bush, struggling to push themselves up on their one arm. Their thigh felt like fire that wanted to burn itself off. The other Utah raptors prowled near, led by Alpha. Alpha grunted twice, padded up with their teal feathers standing on end. They still had some of Utah's thighs stuck in their teeth from Utah's previous mistake. Utah fought their injuries, heaving up just to bow their head and show remorse. Their throat clicked softly in pain, ready to hunt all night to feed the pack. Alpha darted in, jaws sinking around Utah's left hip. The fire burned white hot. Utah's severed leg fell down the slope. They fell a moment later. The creature hurtled toward Probe, screeching in what sounded more like agony than the joy of discovery. Probe's nanites were still too loose to catch it, and the creature plunged headfirst into a flooded trench. None of the creature's family came to help when they coughed. The family departed northwest, following the herbivore. The disabled creature bled enthusiastically, getting Probe terribly dirty. And still they squirmed, clawing at the slope of the hill, trying to follow their kin. They kept pushing the joint of their lost leg against Probe's metal form, as though willing themselves to stand again. Probe obliged. It unraveled 2,000 semi-metallic fiber clusters from its bank, plugging every tissue fissure it found. It duped nerve clusters to mimic instinctive walking patterns. There wasn't any flesh that Probe's smart metal couldn't plagiarize. Probe worked quickly, eager to finish and clean the gore off itself. It was so sticky. Utah bit the stupid metal thing. Their teeth shattered, and worse, then the metal got in their mouth and started replacing their broken teeth. At least the metal teeth let Utah bite the metal thing easier. They tried to run away from their new leg, but it was part of their gait now. Utah tore up the slope, the leg helping the whole time. It was a funny, thin leg. It didn't even have a claw. Probe rewrote the foot and sprouted the sharpest blade this planet would ever see. Utah could shave neurons with it if they wanted. This was fun work. The second law was to help out a host culture. Ever since one planet had turned an exploratory probe into a chair, that probe revolutionized recreation for its culture and set the standard for anthropology. No decent probe wouldn't want to be sat on. Probe was elated when Utah manually tapped their new claw on the ground. They'd been bonded for seconds, but Probe could feel Utah's desire to test it out. It also felt Utah about to swoon. Utah staggered, nearly toppling down the slope. The blood loss and infections were taking everything. Hunger gnawed at their belly, and the chill of sickness made even their veins feel ravenous. Their olfactory senses had been defective since infancy. When they sniffed this time, metal poked into their snout, whispering new senses to them. They sensed things northwest, things that immediately made Utah salivate. Soon, they ran for the hunt on an alien leg. Probe barely had to tailor its new design, given how rapidly Utah adapted to it. Together they cut through the woodlands and stalked below the bush line of a grove, feathers close to their skin. As far as Probe knew, Utah had hunted in the same pack for 1.5 years. It expected they'd struggle to hunt alone. Before them was a field of Gastonias, herbivores with spiny shelled backs. Bulky parents sheltered plump young as they grazed on grasses. Probe experienced a lifetime of Utah's memories of how Gastonias tasted, and the relief of gorging on them after long fasts. Probe almost felt hungry itself. On the opposite side of the herd, hunched in a ditch, were 3 more Utah raptors. They all had teal feathers, and one had Utah's blood on their mouth. Probe sensed them. It pinged Utah. Utah squinted. They checked the Gastonias, and then their former pack, all artlessly clustered in the same ditch. Utah nosed a chunk of granite away from the bushes. They didn't need the metal for this. They set up the rock, swung their tail, and batted the granite high over the bushes, sailing over 2 baby Gastonias. The granite thudded against a cedar near the ditch, and the 3 Utah raptors startled upright. 2 of them squawked, and while chips of granite pattered to the ground, the Gastonias all stared at their predators. They honked, shielding their young and whipping up into a stampede in the opposite direction. Utah's bushes were in the opposite direction. Utah arched low until a Gastonia calf strayed too close. Their new claw worked perfectly. Utah's pack approached, with Alpha coming closest. Their nostrils quivered, sniffing at Utah as though disbelieving it was truly them. Utah turned their body away and continued feasting. Probe was impressionable, but still approved the snub. Alpha shimmied their hips and raised their hind feathers up in fan patterns. They were more than impressed. They shuffled and turned to one side in an invitation to mate. That's when Probe learned 2 things about its host. They were asexual. They were vengeful. Utah spun around, flashing their mechanical foot blade. Then Probe was dirty again. Alpha's fluids got everywhere, even between Probe's microfibers. It was going to be a chore cleansing itself. It began the cleansing process, only to be interrupted by Utah's tongue. They licked the metal knee clean, then got the thigh, their own scales and feathers. Utah left a mess. It was like they intuited Probe's wants and had given it a gift. Probe responded in an equation that wouldn't make sense to any native life. It was going to love being a leg on this planet.
had not previously read either of these stories by John, and I am absolutely delighted by both of them. I love how they have elements in common, but both go entirely different directions. Tyrant Lizard deals with something that John is particularly good at, finding the potential for stories that have not yet been told. In this case, what if the Jurassic Park-style island simply gets abandoned? But, due to bureaucracy/public outcry, we end up with a caretaker dropped on the archipelago, willing to feed the orphan dinos only slightly rancid fast food meat. I loved how our protagonist finds a way to bond with the poor, tummy-upset creature, and how that in turn improves her own life. I mean, I can absolutely imagine those amazing slice-of-life paintings, and would totally support that Patreon. Meanwhile, we have a different symbiotic relationship appear in Alien Invader or Assistive Device. I was absolutely delighted by the concept of the probe, whose best idea of anthropology is first do some help. Well, their second law anyway. Because it's not by changing the culture they find. It's by changing themselves to be what's needed. To be thoroughly delighted if you become a leg or a chair. I keep saying delight, but that's what I come back to so much with the joy in both of these stories. In each case, there is an absolute joy in the two sentient beings finding each other, meeting each other at the place that they are, and building a beautiful, mutually assistive companionship for the future. Some Escape Pod Roundup news for you in case you've missed it, but Cats Cast is now live. Find them on Twitter at CatsCastPod, and all original fiction published by Cats Cast as a tongue twister will be available for everyone for free, and additional Cats Cast episodes will be available exclusively to patrons at the premium content level and above, so hop on over to the Patreon and check that out. Next, we are truly thrilled to receive Hugo nominations for Escape Pod for Best Semi-Prozine and for our esteemed editors Mur and Divya for editing. We are also thrilled to be on the amazing Ignite ballot for Best Fiction Podcast. Thank you so much to everyone who nominated us for the Hugo and to the jury for the Ignite. These are true honors. Escape Pod is a production of Escape Artists Inc. and is brought to you with a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Don't change it, don't sell it. Please go forth and share it. How do you share it, you ask? Well, in addition to your social media of choice, consider rating and or reviewing us on podcast listening sites such as Apple, Google, etc. More reviews makes for more discoverability, makes for more Escape Pod for you. Escape Pod relies on the generous donations of listeners exactly like you. So if you enjoyed our story this week, then consider going to escapepod.org or patreon.com/EAPodcasts and casting your vote for more stories that won't leave without their emotional support animal. Our opening and closing music is by Daikaiju at daikaiju.org, and our closing quotation this week is from Jim Henson, who said, "There's not a word yet for old friends who've just met." Thanks for listening, and have fun.